Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants Hangout. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. If you've been tuning in this week, we've been celebrating our ocean. So everyone hopefully knows that June 8th is World Ocean Day. So we've been hosted live events with 25 plus explorers and scientists from all over the world who've dedicated their life not only to researching the ocean, but protecting it. Because I'm sure in a lot of our classrooms, you know that we haven't been the best stewards of our ocean, whether it's overfishing, plastics, global warming affecting our coral reefs. We need to make a lot of improvements if we're going to save and protect our oceans. So really excited for today's event. I want to give a big shout out to any classrooms who are tuning in live via YouTube. Don't forget, you can still get in on the action. There's a chat sidebar on the right. Send in some questions and we'll make sure that we work those in. Of course, let us know where you're watching from. And then to any classroom, whether you're tuning in live on camera or you've got a spot on YouTube, take some pictures, share them online, tag at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. We'll share Fabien's Twitter information as well, so you can tag there. And we love to see our classrooms in action. All right, well, that's enough for me. Let's get to the main event. So as the first grandson of Jacques-Yves Cousteau, Fabien Cousteau has spent his early years aboard his famous grandfather's ship learning how to scuba dive on his 4th birthday. In June 2014, Fabien and a team of aquanauts lived and worked at the bottom of the ocean for 31 days in the world's only underwater laboratory, and he is now currently running the Fabien Cousteau Ocean Learning Center. So he's fulfilling his dream of creating a vehicle to make positive change for our ocean through all kinds of exciting projects, including restoration projects with sea turtles, corals, and mangroves. So Fabien, I know it's a crazy week for you. We're so excited to have you joining in for us. The students are obviously want to learn a little bit more about what you're up to, and then we'll let them fire away with a little Q&A action.
Well, excellent. Thank you all very much for having me and spending some time. I am really excited because World Ocean Day is coming up, as you heard, June 8th. I don't know how you're going to celebrate this. I will be on the United Nations Peace Boat talking about World Ocean Day, how amazing our oceans are, how fragile they are, and of course, gender equality within the oceans, which is this year's topic. And with that, I'm extraordinarily excited because over the years, we've tried to include that as an underlying part of the puzzles that we try to solve in the oceans. And being able to have both men and women work together on such difficult projects is imperative so that we can go out there and really tackle some of those STEM type of challenges that we face today. But to take a step back, some of you may or may not have heard of Jacques-Yves Cousteau. So if you'll bear with me, I'd love to share with you some visuals instead of just watching me bob my head back and forth and speak to you all. I'd love to share with you some visuals to walk you through a little bit of my family's history, and then maybe even talk a little bit about some of the expeditions that we've done in the past and what we're planning on doing in the future, hopefully to share some of the knowledge that our team and I gain while we're out there so that you all can enjoy part of the adventures and maybe even have your own adventures in the future as well. So with that said, let's see if I can share my screen here. Let's see. Yes, share. There we go. Can you see a screen? I see a green screen on Google Hangouts, but can you see a planet that should be spinning on your screen? Can you see that?
Yeah, we're nice and full screen. Looks good.
All right. Awesome. So this is just a slide that I love to start with because I love to talk about the human-ocean connection and why we exist on this planet, something that we take for granted all the time, which is something that makes our planet so unique, this oasis in space, which is the water part of our planet. And that's really the universal connector and the life support system for all the life that we know and cherish in this beautiful, beautiful little blue marble. And more importantly than that, or just as importantly than that, to give perspective, is that we have such an amazing opportunity. Despite all of modern day ocean exploration today, we've explored less than 5% of our ocean world. And that's because the living space on our planet, right? The area that most critters live and thrive and call home 99% of it is represented by the ocean part of that layer. All 3.4 billion cubic kilometers of volume. And the vast majority of our biodiversity lives and thrives in and around that aquatic ecosystem. Now, I grew up in a rather strange family. My grandfather, or my grandparents, Jacques-Yves Cousteau and Simone Cousteau, were pioneers in ocean exploration, along with the folks from the Calypso, the fabled ship that my grandparents and their crew took around the world for over 50 years worth of expeditions, including 134 resulting documentaries and a bunch of big screen movies, like The Silent World, The World Without Sun, and everything else. But in order for my grandfather to be able to explore the bottoms of the ocean and to go into these far off places, when he first started, there were no tools to do so. The only people that had peeked below that blue veneer into the ocean world were hard hat divers looking for sponges and Navy divers who had to either wear hard hats or oxygen rebreathers, which are extraordinarily dangerous, to go and place mines on enemy ships. And that was really about it. By and large, no one had ever really seen the undersea world. And that's how, when I grew up, the magic and mystery and the forging of these new technologies, such as scuba. My grandfather had to invent the regulator with his friend Émile Gagnon from Air Liquide. All the basic stuff that today we take for granted, underwater cameras and undersea habitats and submarines for scientific research, and all those things were things that he and his team had to build in order to go longer, deeper, and further into that aquatic ecosystem. And despite his efforts and many efforts since then, to go and explore the oceanic world, we've explored less than 5%. So it was an amazing experience to be able to grow up seeing the planet from the bottom up. And as you mentioned, I've been scuba diving since my 4th birthday, not something that is very common. As a matter of fact, I would not recommend it for most people, but we're a strange family, and they found me at the bottom of the pool, buddy breathing with a family friend while he was reading the newspaper underwater. And then we went from there out to Catalina Island, which is off the coast of California, where I did my first open water scuba diving experience, where I was able to see just an amazing fireworks display of life between the Garibaldi, those bright orange fish, into the kelp forest, these amazing cathedrals underwater with shafts of light going through and everything else. And that really mesmerized me, how amazing and magical the undersea world was. And since then, we've been able to go off on all sorts of really neat expeditions, such as here in the Amazon River with my father and my sister and myself, looking at these strange and unique creatures that call the aquatic world home, or going out to the Humpback National Marine Sanctuary off of Maui in the Hawaiian Islands, and being able to commune with some of the most majestic creatures on this planet, whales, in this case humpback whales, and looking at the connections that we have. This particular animal and us have the marine mammals have this thing called the mammalian reflex, and we have a vestige of this in our own DNA, which is simply a trigger mechanism from the receptors in our face that when we submerge underwater, it slows our heart rate down, it slows our oxygen content down, and we're able to go much longer and further underwater because of that. Now, we've lost a lot of that ability. Obviously, cetaceans, whales, and dolphins still have it. Pinnipeds still have it, and they, of course, can stay down for vast periods of time. Now, something that I had talked about, I think, last year maybe, was an experience that I had the privilege of leading and taking on 5 other people with me to live and work underwater for 31 days. We called it Mission 31, and we were based out of the the world's only undersea marine laboratory called Aquarius. Aquarius is this glorious 560 square foot living space at the bottom of the sea. It's 20,000 millimeters down, as one of my scientists love to say, but 60 feet down. And what this allows us to do is to live at pressure depth. And one of the biggest frustrations that I have as a scuba diver is that limit of time. When you're diving from the surface and you go down, you know that your limits are the amount of air that you can breathe in the tank that you're carrying with you, and the bottom time that you have, because you don't want to accrue decompression obligations. Well, when you're an aquanaut, it's like an astronaut underwater. You flip everything on its head and you maximize your decompression obligations, which allows for unlimited bottom time. And so all of a sudden, that limit of time at the bottom has gone away. And that's just a fantastic opportunity to live on this planet's final frontier and really go out into the water column as long as you need to. And that gives us the ability to do all sorts of things, such as study things like coral reef systems here. And you can see this coral reef is not doing too well out in the Florida Keys, but we're out there and we're looking at the fluorescence of coral reefs with this pulse amplitude modulated fluorometer, which uses the fluorescence of coral to the health and the consumption rate of the living tissue, if you will, of the coral, and seeing what's going on a microscopic level. And that really gives us a better gauge of the dynamics of the coral reef so that we can make better decisions down the road from the surface. It also gives us the ability to stay down for much longer periods of time. And these underwater coral cities have all sorts of residents. And those residents, by and large, when you come down scuba diving, it's like crash landing and scaring the bejesus out of all the residents. And of course, they scatter and they hide. And you can't study them as well from scuba diving, because by the time that everything calms down, it's almost time for you to go back up to the surface. But with the unlimited bottom time that we have as aquanauts, we're able to commune with nature, get closer, really be able to study them in ways that you simply can't do without that luxury of time at the bottom. And those animals start coming up closer. And that's really neat, because this Goliath Grouper in this picture is one of the most majestic endangered sea creatures out there in the greater Caribbean area. They are now starting to come back in the Florida Keys because they're protected. And these animals get to be up to 800 pounds and 8 feet long. They're gentle giants, like giant puppy dogs. But when you scare them, or when they're going off and trying to do their predator behavior, where they try and eat their food source, they have something really cool where they bark or boom. And when they boom, their mouth opens and their jaw pops, and that resulting cavitation bubble in front of their mouth for a split second is hotter than the surface of the sun, and the resulting pressure wave that comes out of their mouth stuns their prey, and at the same time they slurp up their prey at the exact same moment. And this is something that you simply can't see with the naked eye, but when you're able to be down at the bottom for extended periods of time with experimental camera systems like the Edgertronic camera, which you can see here in this photo, where Grace Young and Liz McGee are manning while I'm back at the habitat programming it to do up to 20,000 frames per second. Now imagine for a second you're doing slow motion on your camera, on your iPhone or whatever device you have, and you can do up to 240 frames a second, which is not nearly enough to see the booming and that cavitation bubble. So you need camera systems that can go up to 20,000 frames a second. We were lucky enough to have one of the prototypes with us. One of the other things we were studying, which you can see them doing on this particular pole, is Christmas tree worms and, of course, the mantis shrimp, one of my favorite hard-shelled creatures. That animal is so amazing. It battles with the other amazing creature that is probably my favorite creature in the entire world, which is the octopus. And the mantis shrimp has something that is really special, which is, besides having armor, and it looks a little bit like a lobster if you've never seen one, it has praying mantis type of arms. And what it does when it goes and hunts for prey, or when it defends itself, is it pops those arms just like a praying mantis does. And the result is that it's so powerful that the punch from that mantis shrimp's claw is as strong as the power of a .22 caliber bullet. And what that does is, of course, is defend itself, or it catches its prey. But all this happens within a split second, before the blink of an eye, and you need these camera systems to be able to capture that in slow motion in about 6,000 or 7,000 frames a second, so that we can look at biomechanics, and of course we can do biomimicry and such like that. The reason why you probably don't see mantis shrimps very often in aquariums is that that punch is so powerful, it can actually shatter the glass that would keep them in the aquarium. Now, if you all will permit me, I know that we have limited time, but I'd love to share a quick video of what an aquanaut does on a day-to-day basis. What is the life and times of an aquanaut? And I'd like to show my two other aquanaut scientists from FIU, who will share with you a little bit of a typical day for them at the office on my team while we're down below.
Back in the habitat at, what time we got out of? Okay, it's like 9:30. Yeah, 9:30. Science. Tonight we were camming the corals, as we like to say. It's using an instrument we call pulse amplitude modulated spectrometer. So kind of a mouthful, we just go with cam. But what it does is it hits these corals with a really intense pulse of light, and then measures the amount of light that is reflected back off of those corals. Nice dinner. Very delicious chicken breast with mashed potatoes. You know how that is. Needs to cook so it's good. You have the grill rice on it. A little slower right now. But once we turn on some hot water, that will heat right up. And then, of course, the mashed potatoes.
As you can tell, they were a little bit tired. We would dive 10 to 12 hours a day. And of course, that's exhausting. We would have to eat 5 times as many calories worth of food as we do on land. And I've got to tell you, as a French person, that was probably the hardest part of the entire 31 days, because that food was awful. Freeze-dried food or astronaut food is not something that I particularly enjoy, but we had to eat so many of these packets morning, noon, and evening. But one of the coolest things was that we had, for the first time at the bottom of the sea, we had Wi-Fi, and so people could actually watch in to the galley out there and the operations out in the water column, what we were doing. The saddest moment, of course, was having to give up that luxury of time. So we had to decompress inside the habitat. So we closed the outside door. And then, of course, we brought the pressure inside the habitat back up to surface pressure. And we were on and off oxygen for 24 hours. And then once we got to that 24-hour period, we quickly put our diving gear back on and jumped in the water and bounce dived to the surface very quickly, where we rejoined the surface world. And I've got to tell you that it was very strange, because the feeling of going from this amazing jungle, underwater jungle, this coral reef that had so much life and vibrancy and animals and sharks and rays and you know, all sorts of mantis shrimp and all that, to piercing back into the surface and looking around for the first time in 31 days, and it's just this empty sky and just a couple of human beings on a boat. And it was just such a jarring experience to be back on the surface world. I so wish I could have spent 31 more days at the bottom of the sea. But that said, I wanted to just go to this final slide to finish talking about that, which is really, what do I envision for the future of ocean exploration? Well, I certainly do envision that we need all sorts of technology out there, such as ROVs and AUVs, drones, that sort of thing. But there's nothing like the human experience at the bottom of the sea or on a final frontier to experience firsthand what's going on out there. And that's where I will say that no matter how amazing technology is and how awesome robots are and everything else, and those are invaluable tools for exploration of space and inner space, I truly believe we still need the human presence at the bottom. And that's something that I envision that we will have to continue on with. Now, I don't know if I can get out of the screen share here. Am I out of the screen share?
You got it. You're back.
All right. I will say that in the near future, I would keep my eyes peeled because we've done a lot of other expeditions. For example, on June 9th at 9 p.m. on Science Channel is the premiere of our television series of Legends of the Deep. So it's another bunch of expeditions that we have done. And I would keep a real close eye on the internet, as well as your ears peeled and your eyes peeled, because we're going to be announcing something really, really large in September, which hopefully will be history making for ocean exploration. And it has something to do with what I just talked about.
All right, very cool. We're going to keep an eye out for that one. And I know just recently you were on another expedition diving in submersibles in the blue holes with another friend of mine, a colleague at Nat Geo, Erica Bergman. So it looked like that was a lot of fun too.
Yes, so Erica Bergman and the team at Aquatica, myself and my team, we got a chance to go down to the bottom of the blue hole. And as a matter of fact, I'm glad you said that, because we did a live show, but the live show was very different. So we did a live show from the bottom of the blue hole on Discovery Channel. We were able to show live what was going on. Well, it was sort of live. We had some technical difficulties, and that's not unusual on expeditions, especially being so far remote. But we were able to go to the bottom of the blue hole in submarines for the first time since my grandfather in 1973. And we were able to look and see how amazing the blue hole is, what the mysteries are that it was holding, and the different layers from the top layer, which has a lot of sea life, to about 300 feet where you have an anaerobic layer that all of a sudden is kind of like a shield. And then you pierce through that milky shield of anaerobic bacteria. And then you go through that into a very clear layer at the bottom. It's like a moonscape with a bunch of weird tracks, and then some skeletons of dead sea creatures. And then, of course, you're looking for the mysterious sea monsters that everyone is talking about. And I will say that on the live show, we didn't show a lot of the legends of the Mayans and the secrets that the blue hole holds. But if you keep tuned in on that television series, Legends of the Deep, there is a special specifically dedicated to that expedition in the bottom of the blue hole. And Erica and a lot of other folks who were part of this, as well as myself and Richard Branson, who went down to the blue hole once, are captured in that particular 1 hour special. And it's pretty exciting. It's pretty thrilling. And we reveal, at least with a lot of certainty, what that sea monster may have been.
All right, awesome. Well, Fabien, your family has inspired so many. I think this week, I don't think there's any explorer who we've had on who didn't, when asked what their inspirations were, who didn't list someone like your grandfather. We just had an event with Celine in April where she shared her new film, Tribes on the Edge, which was really cool. So she talked about the making of that film and hung out with the classrooms. And I wanted to share my screen really quickly because last year, when you did an event with us, there was a classroom, it was a kindergarten classroom who joined in, and they were so excited by the event that they became aquanauts for the week in their classroom. So I just want to share this picture that they sent me. Let's see if I can get it. So it's not the best quality, but they built their own Aquarius reef base, and they spent the week diving in their classroom, learning about the ocean, living underwater. So that was super cool. They had a blast doing that.
That is so cool. Well, I really hope that we see a future with a new underwater cities, so that not only people of my generation, but hopefully people of your generation will get a chance to go out there and be aquanauts out there for yourselves. And I look forward to so many of you being curious about the ocean, whether you go snorkeling or you become professionals in the ocean space, whatever that may mean. I really encourage all of us to cherish the ocean world in a way that respects our life support system, as if our lives depended on it, because it really does. As Sylvia says, no blue, no green. And as my grandfather used to tell me all the time growing up, people protect what they love, and they love what they understand, and they understand what they're taught.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's start meeting some of our classrooms. I know they're going to have lots of questions for us. So we're going to go to Rockwood, Ontario, so not too far from me. Mr. Dufour is hanging out with us at Sacred Heart. Let me get their microphone turned on. Let's see how they're doing. How we doing, Rockwood?
Good.
All right. Who's up with a question?
How did it feel once you got out of, once you went up to the shellfish after 31 days underwater?
That's an excellent question. Excellent question. So how did I feel? Aside from feeling sad for having left such an amazing alien world, I've got to say I was extraordinarily tired. I was so energized at the bottom because we're living at 3 atmospheres of pressure. So you're getting a lot more oxygen in your blood. And then when you get back to the surface after working so hard, so many days for so long, you get back to the surface and you just want to collapse on your bed and fall asleep. As a matter of fact, we had to be under 3 days worth of doctor's observations to make sure that we were okay after spending so much time at the bottom of the sea. But I was also excited because it gave me a better perspective of why habitats are so important and why sea exploration or ocean exploration is so paramount to wanting to discover more into our future. And whether we talk about space colonization or anything else, ocean exploration is an integral part of that process. And that's really something that we need to look at and we need to bolster. And I really encourage us as a species, us as a global community, to be able to do that. And so I'm really hoping that that people will listen and that we will build underwater cities in the future, as well as other technologies, maybe liquid breathing. Maybe we can find better ways of getting out there, safer ways of getting out there, so that more people can go and explore. But I would definitely keep a close eye on the ocean exploration space, because there's a lot of new stuff that's coming out there. And I'm really excited this week because I've been to the Explorers Club, I've been to Paris, I've been to all sorts of places where we talk about oceans and new breakthroughs in science and technologies and discoveries. And I've got to tell you that it is more exciting than I've ever seen it in the last 20 years. And I can't wait to share that with you. And hopefully you all will get a chance to get a little bit of a taste over this week, and hopefully especially during World Ocean Day this Saturday, as to what's going on out there.
All right, great question to get us started from our group in Rockwood. We're going to jump to Illinois this time, heading over to Chicago with Mrs. Knight's 3rd graders. Let's get that microphone turned on. How we doing, 3rd graders?
Good. What do you do when you come across plastic and pollution?
So that's one of the very sad stories I have to tell you. That's a very, very, very good question. When I was a kid, when I was your age, I very rarely saw plastic anywhere. I saw a lot of sea glass on the ocean, and that wasn't too bad because we all love collecting sea glass, right? But I didn't see as much plastic as I do now. Now, unfortunately, I see a lot of plastic everywhere. We dump, unfortunately, over 300 million metric tons of plastic in our oceans every year. That's unbelievable. I can't even wrap my head around how much plastic that is. But when I go out into the ocean on expedition, it's almost impossible for me not to see plastic somewhere. And most times we are in places where no human beings has ever been, whether it's on the surface of the ocean or all the way at the bottom in a submarine. And that really makes me sad, because when we go and see plastic at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, or in 1,000 miles away from any civilization at the surface, sometimes it's plastic we can barely ever see, like microplastic, little tiny pieces of plastic. And sometimes it's big, giant wads of plastic that are like a mile in circumference and 90 feet deep. And it's thick and it's big and it's an amalgam. And what's really even more heartbreaking is that we can't just go out there and take it out of the ocean, because now critters from the ocean are living in and around it like it's its own ecosystem. So how do we get that plastic out is something that bothers me and that keeps me up late at night. The best solution is to never put it in the ocean in the first place. But when we're out there and we're on expeditions, not only do we film it, but we also try and take back as much as we can with us, so that we can properly dispose of it, whether it's from plastic from the bottom of the sea or from the surface of the sea. It is our responsibility, each and every one of us, explorers and students and adults and archaeologists, just like accountants. It doesn't matter who we are. We need to clean up our own garbage, because we are treating our life support system as an endless resource in a garbage can, and that is terrible. I am ashamed of my generation for not taking up the challenge much sooner, but I am highly encouraged by your generation getting excited about solutions and about making sure that we don't make the same mistakes. And I want us as adults to encourage you and to give and impart with you all the knowledge that we have and the encouragement, and making sure that you know that nothing is impossible and we can make a difference and we need to make a difference. And whenever I talk to people like you, young people like you, it recharges my batteries, and I know that we can give back to you what we've taken for granted with our ocean world. And I certainly hope that you will get a chance to enjoy it the way that we've taken it for granted.
All right, that's such a good point. I'm so lucky. Every year I get to talk to hundreds of thousands of students in events like these with different scientists and explorers, and it is amazing how switched on the students are. They know what's happening. They want to make a difference. They're doing things in their classrooms. So I'm really excited for this next generation. Let's see, where should we go now? Let's go to Mrs. Sherry's group. They're in Guelph, Ontario. How's it going, boys and girls? How's it going, boys and girls?
Who was your greatest inspiration?
Trick question. I like that question. I had several. Obviously, my grandfather would be too easy of an answer, but he and my grandmother. Maybe I'll talk about my grandmother as one of my biggest inspirations, because my grandfather everyone knows, but my grandmother, who was an unsung hero, was really largely responsible for my grandfather's success. Fabien Cousteau, who was a woman who was born in an era where women couldn't be sea captains and couldn't go into the Navy, was the daughter of an admiral, the granddaughter of an admiral, and she always wanted to be on the sea. And so she was on Calypso, my grandfather's ship, more than my father, my uncle, and my grandfather combined. She was the true captain of Calypso and the real catalyst for the success that my grandfather had. And she was a great inspiration to all of us in the family. So that was one of my inspirations, is Fabien Cousteau. But beyond this, I would say that many people out there that push beyond the boundaries of the known, that go out there and go into places and into experiences that make them a little unsure, that uneasy, that are different, that are places that they're not familiar with, that push beyond the boundaries of the understanding that we have today, and come back, sometimes risking their lives, but coming back with a greater knowledge and a greater sense of discoveries and understanding of why we're here. People like Dr. Sylvia Earle is a fantastic example. Dr. Mark Patterson from Northeastern University is a great example. And there are many, many, many people that I probably should list on that list of inspirations for people like myself, and especially me personally, to want to go out there and explore in my very own right. And at the end of the day, I go back to my childhood. Hergé was a company, a gentleman that did cartoons, that did comic books, Tintin, the comic books, and those were adventure stories. And that gave me just a sense of fantasy. I would live in those comic books and fantasy world of exploring. So that was definitely an inspiration. And people like Jules Verne. Jules Verne was a writer who wrote these amazing stories of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Around the World in 80 Days and many, many others. And those books were inspirations as well. And thanks to those authors' imaginations, they caught my imagination as a kid. And I was not a very good student in school. I would be daydreaming all the time. But when I read those books, I immersed myself in those stories. And that really got me jazzed and energized and dreaming of my very own adventures.
All right. We're going to take a trip to Goderich, Ontario. We have some students hanging out with Mrs. Ball today. Let me get their microphone turned on. How are we doing, Goderich?
Hi, Joe. Our question was, you're talking about having underwater cities, and we wondered what he thinks the impact will be on the ocean ecosystem of those cities.
That's a very astute question, and I've got to thank you for that. That's something that is always in the forefront of my mind, because whether we talk about underwater cities or we talk about living sustainably on this planet, we need to take into account our impact on what's happening. And we breathe, therefore we have an impact. And that's just a fact of life. But the idea is really to start living in balance with our life support system. And I just came last night from one of the lectures at the Explorers Club, and it had to do with mining the resources at the bottom of the sea. And that really worries me. It worries me on a number of levels, because we don't have a good track record of trying to use resources in a sustainable way on this planet. We need to understand that this is a natural resource bank account, and we've been eating away the capital as if it doesn't cost anything. And we've been doing it in ways that are hugely destructive and have a lot of repercussions. And mining on land has shown a lot of problems, from fracking to gold mining to what have you. Why on earth should we consider extracting resources from the sea in the way we've been doing traditionally, and until we can look at new models, innovative technologies that will not impact the ecosystem in a significant or in an unsustainable way, why should we even talk about underwater mining? And that was something that was brought up, and I think that came into a heated debate, of course, because you have the for-profit mining companies which are trying to provide goods or materials for us to enjoy goods such as cell phones and such and things like that, and cars and so on and so forth, that we need in our everyday lives, or that we want in our everyday lives. Until we know how to have better practices, this is something that we're going to struggle with. And considering the amount of damage we've done in the undersea world, I'm very concerned with this. And so if we are to imagine an underwater city, or even just an underwater habitat, we must take into account as our baseline the impact or the footprint that an underwater city or habitat would have on the ecosystem. And I'm happy you said that, because I've been thinking about this for several years. And one of the things that we've been studying is how to make it a closed loop system on an energy level, on a food consumption level, on a waste management level, as well as generating energy systems and life support systems that respect the local ecosystem, so that we don't have a major impact beyond what's in balance with what nature can deal with within that particular underwater ecosystem. So it is a very good question, and something that we're studying. But with the new innovative technologies that we're looking at, such as ocean thermal energy conversion and other things like that, I believe we can build a model that is a semblance of what we dream and hope for as ocean explorers and scientists, and in general for the future of our species.
All right. Exciting times on our planet and in our ocean, especially. Mrs. Stevenson's class, Vienna, Virginia, 5th graders hanging out with us. Let's get that microphone turned on. How are we doing, 5th graders? All right, who's up?
Hola.
So, when you were living underwater, how did you get in the ship without letting water in?
Very good question, and something I get asked all the time, because I don't cover that very well. Most of the time, it's very hard to put all the details in a short presentation. But essentially, imagine a habitat, an underwater house, such as your house or your apartment or whatever, or a building, in the ocean, but like an upside down cup. When you take a cup and you turn it around and you push it down into the water, there's a bubble of air that stays in it. It gets a little bit smaller because of the water pressure in there, but essentially that's the way an underwater habitat functions. The air inside the habitat is the same pressure as the water outside the habitat, and therefore the water does not come flooding into the habitat. And that's the air cavity that we're in, and that we live in and sleep in and do our science in. And then we have an opening in what we call the moon pool area, which allows us to get in and out of the habitat freely. And that opening is at the bottom. It has stairs into the water. It's like a pool, if you will, or a jacuzzi, except without the bubbles, and it has stairs into the open ocean. So we put on our scuba gear, and then we go into the ocean, and then we come back out of the ocean through that opening at the bottom of the habitat.
All right, very cool. I do want to give a quick shout out to Mrs. Burns' class. Mrs. Burns' class, grade 7s in Milton, Ontario. They were with us for the presentation, but their internet gave out on them before the Q&A. So I want to give a shout out to them, and they'll be tuning in afterwards to catch up on the Q&A portion. So Fabien, thank you so much. It's always great to steal some of your time. Your enthusiasm is contagious. It just, you know, we hear so many stories about negative things that are happening. It's exciting to hear about exploration and solutions and to these challenges. So thank you so much for being with us today, sharing those stories. And we're so excited for those new announcements you teased.
Never lose hope. There's always a possibility that we can do things. The word impossible does not exist. If you dream it and you believe in it and you put enough effort into it, you can make it happen. People protect what they love. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of bad news out there, but we can change the course that we've set for ourselves, and we must change the course that we've set for ourselves. So let's get at it. Let's find those solutions. Let's implement them, and let's honor oceans, not only for World Ocean Day this Saturday, but every day, because it is a beautiful place and because our future depends on it.
All right. Well, last thing we'll do today, I'm going to turn the microphones on. Boys and girls, you want to get nice and loud, a big goodbye and thank you. And then we'll... You're all so good at that. Thanks again, boys and girls. Awesome questions. Fabien, thank you so much. And we look forward to our next adventure together. Thanks so much, Fabien.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Happy